We already went over Very Little Nightmares, Little Nightmares 1 and 2, and we slightly touched on the comics. But today, let's dive deep and take a closer look at them. Hi folks, I'm R, your narrator, and here's Little Nightmares comic explained. Before we get into the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and beware, as there will be spoilers ahead. Little Nightmares comics presumably take place after the events of Very Little Nightmares. After our protagonist, the unnamed girl, falls to her death into the sea, her yellow raincoat floats atop the water with the post-credit scene showing the mysterious girl climbing down the cliff and presumably wearing the yellow raincoat. This mysterious girl then gets on a wooden raft and leaves the nest. This mysterious girl is no other than Six, presumably, a major character soon to be introduced. We can assume this comic is after Very Little Nightmares, as Six is still in the maw, not possessing her abilities. Presuming that the mysterious girl from the nest is Six, soon after the events of Very Little Nightmares, we see Six escaping one of the twin shifts. Going through a ventilation duct, Six stumbles upon 5 other kids seated around a bonfire. One of the other kids asks Six about how she ended up here, to which we get a glimpse of what happened after the events of Very Little Nightmares when Six talks about her past. Six walks among the guests, professionally dressed with suits and briefcases, in the streets of Pale City with the 2 familiar warped buildings. As Six runs in fear, looking at her back, she bumps into an overshadowing character with an extremely deformed long face. This character points to Six and we skip to the next part, which could suggest Six experiences a blackout and doesn't remember. Six carries on telling that she remembers that she was talking to a boy behind bars, who urged Six to remember experiences before she forgets. Six remembers that she was lured by a music box at a point, which the janitor had set as a trap. Six manages to escape him, observing the janitor being attracted to the TV static. Then suddenly one of the kids around the bonfire wrapped in bandages gets swallowed by a leech. Six carries on remembering her scattered memories, going through the events of the maw, encountering the jailed boy who gives her a loaf of bread, the chefs, the guests, and the lady with clocks and eyes around the images. Does this suggest that it's a time loop, as I've suggested in my previous videos? We get a look at the lady, with the questions: what is she hiding? What has she seen? Where we get an image of the overshadowing character who's called the Ferryman. Then we move on to the image of the overshadowing character who's called the Ferryman, transporting a girl with yellow raincoat to the maw in his boat, who is tied with ropes. This might suggest that the lady is in fact Six, who was transported to the maw by force. Here's a quick, crazy but sensible theory. After possessing the lady's powers, an amnesiac possessed Six travels to the Pale City in order to trap Mono in the depth with the Eye, so that he becomes the Thin Man whose abilities get exploited by the Eye in order to possess people through TV transmissions. Then Six gets back to the maw and becomes the lady. You might ask how Six was imprisoned by the Hunter, and how did she lose her raincoat? My assumption is that it was all part of the plan. She lost her raincoat on purpose, as Mono would consider why would Six wear a raincoat in an enclosed room with no rain. She also put herself in the room on purpose, as Mono was directed to the Hunter's house by the Eye through the TV, and giving him the dream to lure him further into the city. We can then see the Hunter, who lives in isolation away from the city and wears a mask, maybe in an effort to stay disconnected from the Eye's manipulations. The Hunter shoots anyone in sight and likes taxidermy to fill the void in isolation, possibly. Why would the Hunter imprison Six and not kill her? Even examining the Hunter's traps, they were usually bear traps, which would easily injure Six severely. But she is intact in the room. Even the suspending traps seem to never get visited by the Hunter, letting the victims rot in there. So that could possibly mean that the events in the maw happened prior to the events in Little Nightmares 2. And after the events of Little Nightmares 2, Six travels back to the maw to assume the role of the lady. And you might also say, why wasn't she using her powers? She could simply just hide her powers from Mono to convince him that she's a vulnerable kid. Moving on, Six continues saying that sometimes it's best for memories to be locked away. Therefore, this could suggest that she remembers parts of her memory but doesn't want to remember. Another boy tells his story about the North Wind. The boy carries on that a mysterious wind destroyed their village. He and his sister survived this wind, but it kept following them. They find an intact barn and stay in it, which the wind can't destroy mysteriously. The wind scratches the barn and urges them to exit. The wind carries on saying that if he doesn't get the boy, he will lose a wager. The wind gets more aggressive and zaps some crows to death. The boy pleads with the wind to leave his sister alone. The wind tells him that his sister has been his for a long time. The sister then transforms into the ferryman, and the ferryman offers his hand to the boy, which the boy accepts. The wind then cries that it's not fair and that he almost had them. The wind then easily destroys the barn, and we're told that a deal was struck, presumably with the ferryman, that the kid would get shelter and warmth. For at least, it's better to be in the maw than encountering the hostile north wind again. The second issue follows up on the events of the first one. Six pulls a music box from the ventilation duct, which she escaped through from the janitor. She opens the music box, which includes a mirror. One of the kids, who looks deformed, grabs the music box and smashes it against the wall. The deformed kid then starts by telling his story. He, alongside some other kids, come across an abandoned house. The kid seems wary of the place but goes in anyway. The kids stumble upon some items covered with cloths. They pull the cloths and see large floor-to-ceiling mirrors. The kids look deep into the mirrors, which each of them display each kid differently. One, wearing a green hoodie and a cap, gets distorted reflection with long disproportional limbs similar to the janitor and the craftsman. He wishes he could be like this and that he could rescue lost things and play with unhappy kids, similar to how the janitor reached places easily and was imprisoning the children. Another kid, wearing also a green hoodie, sees himself getting big and strong and wishes to be like that. And finally, the kid with orange hat sees a reflection that is bound to a doppelganger. His hand merged with the other one, being completely inseparable. And he wishes he would be like this so he'd always have someone with him to do his chores with, similar to the twin shifts. The wary kid with orange scarf looks into the mirror as well and sees a monster. The monster is reminiscent of the Hanging Man in the first game, Little Nightmares 1. The monster then grabs the strong kid with one of his tentacles and pulls him into the mirror. As he does, the other kids run away, with only the tiny one, who was scared and has the orange scarf on him, fitting through a crack on the wall. The other kids decide to turn back into their normal size by looking back into the mirror. When the kid with a twin looks into the mirror, he sees his original self, but then the mirror quickly changes into the monster, and the monster grabs one of the twins, which leads to his arm getting cut off. The kid with orange scarf then makes a plan to turn the mirrors against each other for him to look into his own mirror with the monster. When he does, the tall kid grabs the mirror and smashes it. The other kids look into their own mirrors and change back to normal, but the kid with the orange scarf gets deformed. The kids run away and thank the deformed kid for saving them, and tell him that they will come back with help, but they never will. Then eventually the ferryman comes and takes the kid with him, presumably to the maw. Then we transition back to the kids in the maw sitting around a bonfire, and the deformed kid continues that he will never look into another mirror. The comic ends with a glimpse of the lady, presumably looking into a mirror. The theme of the Little Nightmares 2 is positioned through TV. The TV is the culprit of the populace getting deformed and turning into mindless monsters. Then, based on a theory I mentioned in my previous videos, Mono gets exploited by the Eye in order to control the populace through TV transmission, as Mono has the ability to do that, to create portals through the TV and use transmissional abilities. So following that theory, there must be a child who also can use mirrors for manipulation purposes, and possibly is exploited by the Eye to do so. The North Wind, on the other hand, seems like an independent entity, not reliant on someone's abilities as it could speak. Is it an entity that the Eye created? Also, the wind seems vicious and kills people, but on the other hand, the ferryman takes the children to the maw and offers them some sort of shelter. Is ferryman part of the plan as well? To get these kids to the maw to perform their part of the grand plan in the loop? It would be great if more comics get released and unveil the secrets behind this cryptic story. That does it for Little Nightmares Comic Explained. Let me know what your thoughts are by leaving a comment down below. Thanks for watching the video, folks. If you enjoyed it and want to see more about different games, stay tuned by hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been great to have you here. Make sure to have a smile on your face and do what truly makes you happy. It's been your host R. Till the next one, have a fantastic day.